Hello, and welcome back to the summer series in association with H&H. I've mentioned the first 2 days, we're live every day until July the 13th, and the sessions are on demand if you can't make one. You might even be watching it on demand as we speak. For those that don't know me, I'm the founder of the Inspiring Workplaces group, Matt Manners. I've been saying little nuggets about the Inspiring Workplaces group every day, so another one. As you're here watching, you probably know that we are a free community with thousands of members we call Inspirers, made up of HR and comms professionals from all over the world. We recently launched our forum, the Inspire Hub, and that's to help you communicate directly with one another and not letting us get in the way. So all our content is free, along with a free membership. So hopefully you're having an explore around the Inspire Hub right now. But back to the summer series and day 3 from the West Coast, so the East Coast of England to the West Coast of the USA, and now to the Midwest and the mighty state of Indiana. And our first double act of the summer series 2, who dey? You might be asking, and that was a little clue for somebody that might know them. They don't need an introduction, but let's give them a great one anyway. Just a small town girl living in a fabulous world. Kristin is always looking for magic moments in the employee experience. Her 15 plus years in corporate comms have given her a unique perspective on work, life, and how human connection improves both. In 2020, Kristin revitalized the awesome Ecology brand and community alongside its founder and other storyteller today, Gose, her partner in life and work. Ecology is now a thriving community of internal communicators who are leading the change in our industry and transforming the future of work one office at a time. And I would highly recommend you check it out. Chuck is equally passionate about and experienced in the art of internal communications. In fact, he's the co-creator of the periodic table of internal communications and the co-author of the Very Hungry Communicator. He is currently head of community and industry insights at First Up. And lastly, but very importantly, an absolute die-hard Duran Duran fan. The title of their session is Community Over Competition, the State of Connection at Work. So without further ado, and for my last pun, let's hear if we're still living in an ordinary world, and welcome Kristin and Chuck to the summer series. Hello.
Matt, that's a win.
you snuck in some good ones there.
Thank you very much.
Who dey indeed.
Yeah, exactly. And I also saw in your bio, Chuck, Skyline Chili, which is something I was introduced to, not physically, but the concept of it in Chicago at our latest event. So I've put it on the bucket list. I have to try some Skyline Chili at some stage.
Absolute must, Matt. Absolute must.
Fantastic. Well, people are here to hear you, not me. So I'm going to exit stage left, and I'll speak to you a little bit later.
Thanks, Matt. I like that Duran Duran somehow gets you into, like, you're in with the Brits.
Well, obviously that's I've been in since 1984, so wow. we're good. We're good.
Wow.
Which, speaking of that, this week in 1984, Duran Duran's "The Reflex" was the #1 song.
Thank you for sharing that.
Forward.
Thank you for sharing that with our audience. Very important. You can stick with the Duran Duran Brit fandom, and I will stick with the royal family jewels and dresses and all of those kinds of fun things. That's my in. That's my in with the Brits. We have a lovely introduction from Matt, so thank you for that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Chuck, for your role at First Up, or what brings you to the community conversation today?
Yeah, I think it's something that you and I, over our own experience, have discovered our passion around it. And that's what a big part of this discussion is going to be about, is the role that communicators play in community, but also just discussing community in general and what it means to us as individuals to be a part of something bigger than ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think the interesting piece, as we talk about community in the workplace, there's such an overlap, which we will get to today, in building community in a workplace and the parallel of building community in our industry. So I trust there are probably many internal comms people or whatever your role is that relates somehow to employee engagement. There's an overlap of what we do in our industry and what we're doing in our workplaces and how that kind of aligns well together. Now I need to get these slides on this screen here. There we go. Oh, I just said it and it magically happened. Amazing. So one of our favorite phrases, I think we should give a nod probably. Is it Kristin Cronin's phrase that we adopted?
I'll give her credit for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So community over competition has become somewhat of a mantra in our house, in our workplaces, in everything that we have been doing lately. And I think it's a very fitting conversation to have today when it relates to employee engagement and what we're doing in our workplaces specifically. So I think my first, question maybe when I started thinking about this topic of community in workplaces is like, does it matter? Like, does it really matter if we have community in our workplaces? And I'm not sure I settled on one specific answer. Do you have a gut reaction to this?
I do. And the answer, my gut reaction is yes.
Okay.
It absolutely does matter. It's something that we saw happen during the pandemic. I've questioned how long of a shelf life pandemic stories have in
Fair.
presentations. So I'm still bringing one up. The customers that we work with at First Up, we saw something change during the pandemic where employees at these companies began looking for community. They were looking for something bigger. The same places they were going to get communication from, they were now looking for community. And we're all parts of communities, whether we recognize it or not. Some are very formal, some are very informal. Neighborhoods are communities, churches are communities, workplaces are communities. Whether or not you're an active participant in that community, I think is a different conversation. We can talk about the importance of activating community members to do something bigger than themselves. But I absolutely do think community matters. Maybe not the same to everyone, but I do believe it does matter in the workplace.
I think it matters. I think one of my hesitations every time we discuss whether it's engagement, community, belonging, all of these topics in employee engagement that we often find ourselves chatting about at the kitchen table, I sometimes wonder, are our expectations too high? And do I need community at work? Yes, I do. Does everyone? I don't know. And so I'm not saying this as a you shouldn't have community at work statement because I disagree with that. I just wonder, do people need varying degrees of community at work? Do people need different levels of belonging, different investments when it comes to belonging? Because I think there are people who are wonderful employees who go to work, do their job, go home. They don't think about work after they go home. Sometimes I think that would be really nice. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that as long as they're not being jerks at work. That's okay. But I think the argument is if there's an opportunity for those people to feel like they belong at work and to have community at work, everything increases. The ante gets upped, so to speak, if that's...
And I think in this case, we're talking about more the philosophical community, not like there is an actual structured piece
Fair.
of software or gathering place or something like that. It's do people feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves?
Okay, so here's my next question then. Does being part of a company mean you are part of a community by default?
Yeah, I think whether you like it or not, you are. I think some people have chosen for you to be a part of a community. They recognize you as an employee of that company. Now, again, that's a very loose definition. I don't think that's the value of community. I don't think that speaks to what makes for a great community. But I think anytime there's this common bond of beliefs, actions, identities, I think people are a part of that community. But I think that's again where the activity level comes into place. Are you a proud member of that community? Are you active in that community? But if you're not either of those things, I think by default you're still a part of it. But if you're not visible, then it's sort of irrelevant. I think too.
Right.
You don't have to be. No one's saying you have to be an active participant. It's something, Kristin, you and I talk about when people get into the conversations about employee engagement. I'm of the belief that I think we should expect low engagement or disengagement. I think that should be the expectation, and therefore high engagement is a bonus. What do we do with high engagement? Now businesses look at high engagement as the default, and then if there's disengagement, there's something wrong. I think it's actually the other way around. I think the same thing goes with community. Not everybody is going to be active. Not everybody's going to care the same. For some people, working at a company, it is just a paycheck. It is a place to work. It is something for them to go and do and be productive, earn an income, and then end of sentence. You and I, wherever we have worked throughout our careers, have always expected more and wanted more out of work. And I think that's where that community starts to come into play.
And I think being part of a community to me inherently means that you are getting something from the group and also you are giving something to the group. There's a cyclical nature to it or a give and take to it. And I feel like at a lot of places, in a lot of workplaces, you're being paid to be there. You may not ever invest anything back into your workplace, and you don't have to. But maybe that should be the model that we look at, is not asking employees to invest something back, but giving them an opportunity to want to do that, right? Like to want to actually give back at work and to want to invest something back, whether that's participating in different employee groups, whether that's, taking on a unique project, all those kinds of things. I think the default for me, when I look back at my workplaces, I don't know if I would say that I ever would have described my workplace as a community. Maybe it was, and I just didn't see it that way, but that says something in and of itself too, right? If that's how people feel. Like I go to work and I'm part of this company because they pay me to be there, but I don't necessarily feel like I have a community at work. Have you felt that way at work, at jobs?
Yep, I'm going to go into story time
Oh,
now. This
love
is
it.
one of my favorite work experiences was when I was in college. I got to work and during the summer, work at the GM factory that my dad was employed at. In fact, I still have his name badge on my desk every day. We share the same name. And obviously, growing up, I got to see what that factory community was like. He would see people out wearing the badge of the factory on their uniform, and there was an instant recognition between the two of them, and a conversation could start. But it was more so going to work there and working on the line at a factory in the summer, non-air conditioned plant. There were these micro communities that existed inside the organization. So the line I was a part of was its own community inside the larger factory. Would those employees have ever called themselves a community? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. They would have
That's a
just
good
said
point.
they're coworkers. They
Right.
treated each other. They were friends. They were family. They all knew about each other's lives. They knew what they were passionate about. They looked out for each other. They cared for each other. They would have never called themselves a community. But looking back, that was 100% like this little micro community. There was a sense of pride that existed on this one part of a line across this entire multi-acre factory. But there was also that identity that was larger about Moraine Truck and Bus, which was the name of the factory, which is no longer around. But there was a community there. No one would have used those words then, but it absolutely was a part of being there.
I think that's the unique part for us now, is using terms like community when we're talking about workplaces, because to your point, that was not ever something my parents would be the same. If I asked them, was your workplace a community? They probably would say no.
Mhm.
But by definition, maybe it was. It's just they didn't use that word, right? So there's
Right.
lots of terms now, quiet quitting, like all these. The concept has existed for probably hundreds of years, maybe more. But we're just now giving it language and essentially putting a label on something that has existed for many years. I think, yeah, I can't say that I have had a corporate job, even, and I'm almost 40 in the last, I don't know, 20 years, that I would have said there was a community feel to it, or that I would have described as a community at the time, which maybe is where a lot of my passion for ecology comes from, in creating a space for people who maybe also feel the same way, that they don't have those communities at work either.
Maybe that speaks to employees, whether they're getting what they want from work, and everybody wants different things from work.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's one of the reasons some people do stick around through rough times or transitions, that where other people might be like, see ya, I'm out. Other people stick around because they've found that thread, they've found that
Yep.
bond with the organization that might speak to the community that exists there.
Funny you bring that up, and I know you actually didn't know that I was going to bring this up, but this was a great segue. There's like a little, our brain waves are talking to each other across the office spaces. So there's a Harvard Business Review article that I was reading recently. I believe it's from 2016. Happy to share the link if people are interested. It's about a sense of belonging at work, which is absolutely inherently tied to community, I feel. So here's they did some studies about employees describing their sense of belonging at work. And related to what we were talking about earlier, that do you need to have community at work? Maybe not, but here's what happens if you do. The studies they did showed that when there was a high sense of belonging, that was linked to a 56% increase in job performance, which is monstrous, a 50% drop in turnover risk, and a 75% reduction in sick days. That's almost hard to believe. That when, in some ways, I want to say, like, when all that happens is people just felt like they belonged. That's it. It wasn't a magic pill of something. It was just that they felt like they belonged somewhere and they had a sense of community. They were less likely to call in sick. They were less likely to quit, or there was less risk of them quitting or the turnover piece of it. And they actually performed better in their job. So maybe that's a little bit of your story at the factory, and the line workers having that sense of community with people that you feel like you're a group with or a part of makes going to work more enjoyable. It makes you feel like you've got an important role to play, and everybody wins if that's the case.
And I wonder now, as we've all gotten distracted by engagement surveys and employee engagement and measurement, and everybody's looking at it different ways, is belonging a better metric to look at? Is if people feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves, and they feel valued, and they feel like they have a role to play, and they know their role to play, they know what everybody else's role is that what we're looking for when we talk about engagement? And you just rattled off some numbers that any leader in the world would happily accept.
Right.
But I think it's then how do you create that belonging? Is it
Right.
I think it's on both sides.
Yeah.
I think the organization has to build that into its culture. I think everyone has to recognize that sense that people want to belong, but also that individual has to want to belong. Not everybody wants more from work, kind of what we were talking about before. They don't necessarily want more. They just want their job. Maybe they've got so much else going on outside of work, that work is just work. And I think in a sense we punish people at times for viewing work that way, because it could be we have no idea what's going on outside of work. Sometimes work just needs to be work, and people just need a job and do it. And I think we punish them if that's all they want, when that's fine. But if there's people that want more, let's find ways to give them more.
I think the most interesting part of this conversation, meaning literally this 20-minute conversation we're having, but also the broader conversation is, what role do internal communicators play in this role of building community at work or fostering a sense of belonging at work? I know that there will be internal communicators who will say, we own that. We should own this. This should be ours to own. We should run with it. Maybe this is a hot take. I don't entirely agree with that, because I think it's a much bigger challenge and a much bigger issue than internal comms saying, we'll fix the belonging problem. Like, we'll own that. I think it needs to be owned by everyone. If internal comms drives it, maybe. I think it's going to depend a lot on the organization, but I think there's an immense amount of work that we can do to hold responsibility for that piece of belonging at work.
Yeah, I would stop short of saying that comms or internal comms is the missing piece. I think it's a piece. I think it can do a lot of really good things to help support the larger community at work, or micro communities, or affinity groups that are there. I think there's a lot of things that communicators can be an ally at times for those communities and be a voice. We talk about this like curse of access sometimes that communicators have, that we get access to leaders and meetings and things that other employees don't even know exist or even know they're a part of it because it's not in their world. But we can often be the voice for that and give them representation. But also, I think at times we can, if we don't do it well, we can probably destroy communities at work.
Yeah.
And not to say that that's the intent of anyone, but by not being that representative, you could actually be a part of the demise of a community potentially, and not being vocal, not being aggressive, accepting no as an answer when leaders or companies say, oh, we don't have time for that. Let's make time for that, because that's what our employees want. Our friend Jason Antoine, had this whole "what employees want" thing, and I think this is what a lot of employees want: is they want to be a part of something bigger. And I think communicators, maybe not the missing piece, because I think we know that we have a role to play in that, but it's for us to define that role, and that's a very individual take for that.
I think that communicators can be the connectors in the organization and the make it happen people, right? So there's, whether it's your people team or, upper your C-suite people, wherever everything should come from your leaders. But if someone else, if another department or another team is driving or owning this belonging piece, that's fine. But you then get to be the messenger, the connector, and you likely also have the tools to offer. Like, here's how we can make these things happen. Here are the tools we have available to us, or here are the tools we could have available to us in order to bring these messages to people, in order to allow people to get together, especially now if people are not doing in person. What are the tools that communicators can bring to the table and say, we've got these digital pieces that we can bring a community of people together, or we can allow employees to get together or connect with each other or meet with each other or communicate in a more efficient way. All of those pieces, I think in many ways we're like, I don't know, are we like the tool truck that shows up? Like, here we are. All right, cool. Like, we've got everything ready to go. Where are we going with it? And then being able to say, you know what, I know you had intended for this to work this way, but here's the tools we have, and that's not going to be great, but here's what we can do.
Yeah, I think at times we can also overthink what this really needs. And I've
certainly never overthought anything in my life.
I'm going to give one first up example and then one of our customer examples. So at first up, we have a Slack channel that is for parents, and especially new parents.
This is for first up employees.
This is a first up employees.
Oh, okay.
So would you call a Slack channel a community?
Some people might.
No, but it is. And people can go in there and commiserate and ask questions and give examples and find more about benefits and did you know this? So absolutely, there's a community of parents that have share information and connect with each other simply inside a Slack channel. It's not rocket science. Where I see sometimes companies getting in their own way is not embracing employees' interests outside of work and letting them bring that to work. So one of our customers is a massive global manufacturer. There's a dedicated community of motorcycle riders at work.
Interesting.
And they go on these big, long rides. And when you're a massive manufacturer, you've got plants all over the place. So they'll go from plant to plant and pick up new crews and ride around. And they've allowed this community to grow because it helps support the business. It helps them feel like they're a part of something bigger. And the workplace is actually interested in bringing that to work because it's got to make them happier. It's got to make them feel like they belong, and they're getting to know people at other plants and all this. And then another great one is a retail chain where they're a community of truck drivers. These people's jobs are completely different from the retail associates and the warehouse associates. But these truck drivers are this such unique community because what they do has a unique value to the business, and they celebrate that. They recognize millions of miles driven without safety incidents and all this. To a retail associate, that should mean something. It doesn't impact their job every day, but to those truck drivers, it absolutely does. It's such a point of pride. They take photos of their trucks in front of mountains and scenic views, and there's a sense of pride. And the company has encouraged them to build that identity and to build that community inside something bigger. And that's got to help. I don't know what the ROI is. I don't know what the metrics are. But as a human being, that says to me that means something and that matters to them.
I think as a tangible takeaway, and I'm going to assume an easy win for a lot of companies, whatever platform you're using, do you have a pet channel? Like, your employees have pets, right? They have dogs, cats, reptiles, whatever. I don't know what that would be. I feel like that would be an easy win of encouraging people to bring a little bit of their personal lives into work in a way that for most people is a safe, like a psychologically safe way to do that, right? Talk about your dog, talk about your cat. I don't know. Do you have plant lovers? People love house plants. I kill all of ours, so I'm not the right person to run that channel. But, there's all kinds of ways to bring in people's personal lives into work that help them feel like they belong and that it's not just this day-to-day work thing. I think we've also seen the parallel between these communities at work and also the communities in our industry. A very interesting shift that I've seen, especially running Ecology, is, and this has happened on the external macro social media scale. So people are moving away from massive platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those things, and they're finding smaller niche communities to be a part of. And I'm seeing that in our industry as well, where, we've got large associations that are still serving a certain purpose. And we're also seeing these micro communities pop up for people to be a part of, either on a much smaller scale or in a very industry specific way. That's been, I think, an interesting shift over the last few years as a result, maybe of 2020 and COVID and everything that's happened, or maybe just an exhaustion of massive channels.
And to answer your question, yes, we do have a pets topic. So we drink our own champagne. We use our own software to keep employees engaged. We have a First Up Friends channel, FURST, first, FUR, first.
Oh, cute.
Friends, where people can post their animal pictures. Now, is that its own community? Probably not. Does it help create a greater sense of community and what the company is about? 100%.
Right. And I think the other interesting part of when we look at community and how to define community, if people have not read The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, it's a great read in terms of not just events and in-person gatherings, but also just senses of community and what that looks like. One of her data-backed arguments is that when you have a community or a gathering of people, by definition, that means that some people are not part of it. And that's an uncomfortable thing for us to acknowledge as communicators, because we want everyone to feel valued, included, welcome, all those things. So my challenge then to people is, yes, you're going to have little sub-communities or a sense of community at work, and that means that others aren't part of it. So my challenge is, on the broad scale at your workplace, what if your sense of community at work was a pride in working there, which then drives a sense of wanting to work at that company? Like, what does that look like? Because the other stat from the Harvard Business Review article is that when there was a higher sense of workplace belonging, there was a 167% increase in their willingness to recommend their company to others to work there. So again, there's HR will love you for that, right? The talent acquisition team will love you for that. So instead of looking at it as excluding people, how can we look at it as creating this sense of community so others want to be part of it? And also offering smaller communities within your workplace that give everyone an outlet. So it's not just one group excluding other people from that.
Can I give an example of perhaps one time where you need to break down communities?
Mm.
So just from my own First Up example, First Up is the marriage of two companies, Social Chorus and Dynamic Signal. For the longest time, we identified ourselves as Legacy one or Legacy the other.
Oh.
And at one point we got to the point, and this must happen in mergers and acquisitions all the time. If you really want to come together, you have to get rid of that. You have to get rid of that old identity, which I think was part of a community at one point.
Yep.
You have to leave that behind in order to truly bring and unite an organization, which we did. But it took us recognizing that, like, oh, this isn't healthy anymore to see I'm over here, you're over here, but we're supposed to be together, but we're real recognizing our previous past. It's almost like being identified by a past relationship in your new relationship.
Awkward.
Like, no, like let it go, come together and let that previous community almost disappear.
Sage it out.
Whatever
Sage
that
out
means.
right. You come on. To wrap up, I want to answer this from Ecology. You answer it from First Up. How have you had an impact on community at First Up?
So I would say in two ways. One, having been at the company itself now for almost 6 years, I've never worked anywhere longer.
Is that a record for you?
In my career, it is. And I've never worked anywhere longer. And so definitely feel like I identify with the organization and what it means, and look for ways to be a better sponsor of people in the organization, and look for ways to bring employees together in creative ways. So I think that's there. But secondly, I built our customer community. I recognized the need for what it meant to be a First Up customer, and how do we bring customers together to share ideas, to share stories, to have fun with each other, to celebrate things. That's an identity. I wish everybody was a First Up customer. Not everybody is. Because of that creates a new identity for some. Some people are very active and engaged. And when you talked about the art of gathering, it's important to know that not everyone's going to engage in the same ways. Everyone's going to be active in the same ways. But just activity alone helps create that community. So then obviously I'm going to turn that question back around to you. We do have a comment that came in.
Oh.
But I would love to turn that back around to you with Ecology.
I have realized over the last almost 3 years now of running Ecology that it has very much become a manifestation of what I wish I had when I was newer in my career. Even when I was going into management roles, I was very much always worked for either very small companies, or, like many internal comms people, worked for places that had either I was the only internal comms person or was a very small team. And so this is interesting that Zane's bringing this up too. Tough to feel like you belong in the massive industry groups. I agree. And so that's a lot of what the basis of Ecology was and is an opportunity for people who are in internal comms to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel welcome, and also to feel like they belong somewhere, which is why I work so hard to bring those people together and make them feel special by being a part of it. So look at us.
I think ultimately for a community to be successful, it does need a place. It does need a gathering, whether geographical, technological, spiritual, whatever it is. There needs to be a place people can come together. And I think that's where communicators can play that biggest role, is helping build that place for them. I would not call Zane a wallflower, by the way, Zane.
I would not either.
However, that's massive industry groups. Some people, that is where they feel like they belong. Other people isn't. So it's about finding the places that you want to belong and that you feel like you're heard. That's when you find that great sweet spot.
Agreed. Communicators can be the connectors and we can be the change. So
absolutely, 100%.
On that note, thanks everyone. I think Matt's jumping back on here.
Hello.
There he is.
Fantastic. I'm engrossed. Could have listened for a lot longer. Thank you so much.
You've got yourself a community now too, this Inspire Hub, which is so cool to see.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Like giving it a home, because we've had a community for the best part of a decade. And it was conferences or smaller events, and then COVID hit, and I think code references are totally legitimate, Chuck. So it's fine. I think it was big enough to have a longer lifespan than 2 or 3 years. Just a small thing. And then that obviously forced us online and forced us to create stuff like the summer series, and realized we could have more of a community and involve more people, as you mentioned, the art of gathering. By having something, you're excluding others who can't come if they're in America and you're doing it in London, or can't come if they're in London and you're doing it in Chicago. And so that's where we really sort of focus the efforts to try and involve and include more and bring more people together that share the same types of ideas and beliefs and passions. And it's been a really nice move in that sense. It's interesting, the whole concept of belong as well, because we firmly believe that the sweet spot for an organization is like references like Dave Ulrich and people like that, and the HBR article, is if they really believe in the purpose of the business and they really feel like they belong and have that sense of community, then that is the sweet spot for just having ultimate employee for an organization. But it's easier said than done. And sometimes you can't have both, but it's just where you focus those efforts in the right places. So I think there's been so much thought provocation by you both here today, which is exactly what we want these kind of sessions to be, those sparks of inspiration. And as Zane said as well, he's come in late, but thank you very much, Zane. If you're still listening, with this session will be available on demand in about half an hour, so you
can have a little taste of us all day long. Lucky you.
Before we end though, Matt, I have a question for you.
Oh no.
How do I become a part of the community of hats like that?
Well, you just have to ask. So I'll send you one.
So here's my ask. I
shaved my head. I shaved my head for charity, and I thought I'd better just cover it up for everybody looking at me over 3 weeks' time. So and any reason to do some merchandise.
Absolutely, I love it.
Yeah. I'd almost got them in orange as well, which has been more your color, I think.
There you go.
No, yeah, absolutely. We're actually going to be giving away some of these in the community hub. Actually, if people want, watch out for that. And there will be a pet channel coming into that, so it's a very good idea.
Inspiring pets.
It's one of the big social media posts that gets so much traction now, isn't it? If somebody look at me and my dog, where's you and your dog? Little cats. Yep. So because they're such amazing little creatures. My dog's not very well at the moment, so I'm going to go give him a hug when I finish this session. So
hugs from us too. Thank
you very much. Thank you. Awesome. That's all I can say. I think it's the best way of wrapping that up, and we'll put this on demand. And we do have the link to Ecology. We'll make sure we put that into the post as well, so people want to go check out the community and everything that you do. You can obviously sense the passion of Kristin and Chuck, I'd highly recommend following them and the work that they do and the content they put out there. So
thanks, Matt.
Well, thank you, Matt.
Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll one day meet in person. Right. On that note, day 3, fantastic day, all done. And we've got our last day of the week tomorrow, another double act back to the west coast of the USA. But please do keep checking in with us and seeing the content. We've still got another 2.5 weeks to go. And thank you for watching, and thank you for being part of our community. Bye-bye.